الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وسندنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. يا رب صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. My dear brothers and sisters, young ones, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to a live episode of Your Health, the health program which deals with cutting edge research from across the medical and complementary health paradigms. Alhamdulillah. What that means is that we look into affairs, treatments, complementary health methods which will benefit our health. This is an information only show, and we are not giving, or it can't be construed as health advice. Okay, anything that's over in writing over the phone should only be construed as information and not as health advice per se. Your GP should be consulted and should be kept up to date with any new therapies you are embarking on. Having said that, and that brings me right on to what I want to discuss today. In the modern medicine, your conventional medicine, when you go to your GP, things are very, very slow. Very, very slow. And any new kind of therapies that come onto the scene very slowly get onto kind of the public health platform, and hence your GP can start prescribing them. It takes a long time. Now that is exactly what I want to talk about today. In 2011, the author of this book, Professor Roy Taylor, the author of this book, Your Simple Guide to Reversing Type 2 Diabetes, with a foreword by Dr. Michael Mosley. So in 2011, this eminently qualified, eminently professional, well-read scientist stroke physician stroke professor, or to give him his full title, Professor Roy Taylor, Professor of Medicine and Metabolism at Newcastle University. He published his research, 2011, 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. And in that research, he showed a method of permanently reversing diabetes. Let's say that again. This chap, Professor Roy Taylor, in 2011, you may have read it. It was on the broadsheets and on the newspapers online for about exactly 24 hours. And then it disappeared. On that article, he mentioned his work and his theory, born and then proven by vigorous research, that diabetes can be reversed. And he showed proofs toward this end. That was in 2011. Okay, so I remember reading this and becoming very excited, mashallah. Because you know what people, and many doctors as well, very well-intentioned doctors I've got to add, still believe, because they're not endocrinologists, they're not, you know, specialist diabetes doctors who study diabetes, so they still believe that diabetes can't be reversed, or if it can, it's too difficult, and they call it a disease of obesity. The fatter you are, the more likely it is that you've got diabetes. Whereas the fact of the matter is that 75% of obese people do not have diabetes. Fact check. All the, you know, hawali, all the references are in here, okay? 75%. In fact, all the people who are diabetic, if you look at them, 50% of these diabetic patients aren't even obese. Obese, yani body mass index above 29.5. 29.5 above is obese. 35 onwards is severely obese. So 50% of people who are diabetic, who are obese, above 29.5 BMI, body mass index, they, 50% of people who are diabetic, they are below this 29.5. They're not obese. They're underneath that. So that should make you understand that it's not obesity that is causing diabetes, number one. Number two, many people who are visibly lean, some people who are below 29.5, some are below 25. Normal weight is between 19.5 to 24.5 BMI. Some people who are 24, 23, they're diabetic. How confusing is that? We've always been told that diabetes is caused by obesity. Someone's got diabetes, is their fault. खाते बहुत हैं, पीते बहुत हैं, they're glutenous, they can't stop their food intake, therefore diabetes is their fault. I beg to differ, and Professor Roy Taylor definitely begs to differ. He spent over 15 years researching this. Now, what this man has to say should interest you and I. As South Asians and Far Easterners, many people, me and you are much more likely to become diabetic. Much more. You know the BMI index I mentioned to you, 19.5 to 24.5, normal weight 24.5 to 29.5, overweight 29.5, above is obese. That's for ethnic Europeans, white Europeans. For Far Easterners and South Asianers, that doesn't apply. For you and me, is far less. For you and me, normal body mass index should be between 18.5 to 23. That's the norm for you. Should be the norm. Far less than the 19.5 to 24.5. So 18.5 to 23, your body mass index should be within that. It's much more narrower. And if you are overweight, then you are 23 BMI to 27.5. Not the 29.5. Not 24.5 to 29.5, where the white ethnic Europeans are. You and I, the Far Easterners, South Asianers, for us, overweight means being in that band of 23.5 to 27.5. If you're in that band, you are overweight. God forbid. Whereas you understand that many people who are overweight aren't even diabetic. Half of them, half the guys who are diabetic aren't even overweight, aren't obese. And then if you are 27.5 and above, as compared to 29.5 for the white European ethnic people, if you and I are 27.5 and above, then you and I are obese. We're obese. So, that being said, what I want to explain to you is diabetes. What causes diabetes? This man, Professor Roy Taylor, spent 15 years studying it. In 2011, he put forward a theory. His theory was diabetes isn't caused by being obese. Yeah? It's not caused when you're above 29.5 for white ethnic Europeans and above 27.5 for you and I, South Asianers and Far Easterners. He said the reason, and I want you to pay attention to this, the reason for diabetes is when you breach your personal fat threshold or individual fat threshold, IFT. IFT, individual fat threshold. What does that mean? Individual fat threshold. What that means is every person, yeah, how many people do you know? Some are tall, some are short, some are like rugby players, some are like long distance marathon runners. You know, everyone's different. Everyone's BMI is different. Everyone's eating habits are different, and everyone's indeed eating requirements are different. So one size doesn't fit all. Okay? One size doesn't fit all. And also, if you're obese, it doesn't mean that you'll get diabetes. This man, after, painstaking, research, he came to the conclusion. And before I tell you the conclusion, his conclusion that he arrived at in 2011 has now been rubber stamped. There's a consensus on his opinion now. Consensus, certainly amongst the endocrinologists, the guys, the diabetic experts in the UK. In the UK. So what I'm going to tell you now and subsequently, this has been endorsed. This is now authenticated. It's a consensus upon this, that this is the cause of diabetes. This book, Your Simple Guide to Reversing Type 2 Diabetes, should be in everyone's home who's at risk of diabetes, or indeed who has or some family member of his or her home has diabetes. Because this man has cured, by the grace of Allah, thousands and thousands of people with type 2 diabetes. That means that their diabetes is gone. Khatam. Over the hill. Across the sea. Never to return, inshallah, if they follow what he tells them. So, as I said before, and I'll tell you what he's mentioned, I'm going to say this in Urdu as well, because it's very important, because most people who have diabetes, unfortunately, from our listeners, are Urdu speaking. So, this man said this in 2011. And he looked at it. He saw he had patients in the 80s when he started studying. Many patients who were obese, they were 23, their body mass index was in the normal way, but they had diabetes. They had diabetes. Halanki, they weren't even obese. So he thought, well, it can't be obesity, or be more explicit, it can't be external obesity. You have something called visceral fat, and you have external fat. So if someone comes to you, he's very, very fat, he looks very fat, you can see the obesity on him, that's okay, you can draw your conclusions. But many people, like maybe, yourselves, who are within the BMI, framework, certainly they're within the 19.5, 24.5, BMI index for normal weight, or in case of South Asianers and Far Easterners, they're between the 18.5 and 23.5, narrower BMI index. Even them guys can have diabetes. So first thing I need everyone to understand is that diabetes isn't caused by your being obese, by being very, very fat. Now, this man, Professor Roy Taylor, has proven, and that was in 2011. 10 years subsequently, about three weeks ago, I read I read an article, and that was the second article in 11 years I read from this man. It disappeared from the, kind of mainstream media. And that was about this book and his subsequent developments. And in them 11 years, all the experts of diabetes in the UK, the endocrinologists, people who deal with the hormones, insulin, etc., have now supported this person's, conclusions. That diabetes isn't caused by obesity. Diabetes is caused by something else. And there is a sure fire method of reversing your diabetes. Very, very easily, your diabetes type 2. 90% of people with diabetes are type 2. Type 2, where your pancreas is producing insulin, but not enough of it, or number 2 is producing as much as it can, but you become insulin resistant, i.e. the insulin is not doing its job of putting the glucose out from the bloodstream into the cells. It's not doing that, so you have a lot of sugar, glucose in your body, which is very dangerous, which is very harmful, because high levels of sugar in the body cause damage to multiple organs, organ systems, to the venous supply. It causes so much, disturbances, and as you go forward with diabetes, your blood sugars go up and down, havoc. So, Dr. Professor Roy Taylor said that diabetes is caused by when a person reaches and breaches his individual fat threshold. That means you could be, highly, severely, morbidly obese, 45 BMI, and you couldn't have diabetes. Why? Because your individual fat threshold is very high and your genes are very high, i.e. your genes are programmed that you will only become diabetic and you'll only breach your individual fat threshold when you reach maybe 46 BMI. Okay. So now let me explain what he says. He says, Professor Roy Taylor says, that diabetes occurs when a person, when you eat fat, either you're going to use it or either your body, if you have surplus, is going to store it in fat cells. These fat cells are under your skin. Now, when you reach the point or that your fat cells cannot store any more fat under the skin, guess where the fat goes? It doesn't just dissolve. It doesn't just disappear. It goes somewhere. Where does it go? It starts to leak into your bloodstream, and then from there it goes onto your liver. It goes onto your liver, and from after the liver it goes on to this amazing gland called the pancreas. Diabetes is a disease of the pancreas. It starts with the disease of the liver, because the insulin that comes from the pancreas is sent via a small vein to the liver, and then the liver decides how much glucose to release in the body. So when you measure your glucose in the morning, that isn't the glucose from the food you've had the previous night. That is the glucose the liver has released because of the insulin sent by the pancreas to regulate your blood sugars. So when you have too much fat and too much sugar in the bloodstream and too much fat on the liver malfunctions and goes, haywire and starts producing too much or too less. Okay, normally too much, because it's full of fat itself and full of sugar. Its function gets kharab. It doesn't work properly. It malfunctions. So diabetes is when your body stops, and everyone's different. This is why you see the disparity between some people who are very, very obese and they have no diabetes, and some guys who are, within the range of 18.5, for instance, and 23.5, which is the BMI ideal weight for South Asianers and Far Easterners. So even if they're between here, they can still be diabetic. Why? Because their genetics dictate that they will reach their individual fat threshold much sooner. So let's say Abdullah is a fit and healthy person, mashallah. He fits the criteria of, the BMI index for South Asianers, and his BMI is 19. Yeah, he's diabetic. Why? He's not obese. He doesn't understand either. Why am I obese when my friend, Abdullah number 2, just is morbidly obese? Yeah, he doesn't have diabetes. It's because Abdullah number 1 has reached his threshold of fat saturation. His body can't store the fat he's eating under his skin in the fat cells, and therefore it can't chuck it onto somebody else like Abdullah number 2. It has to go somewhere, and it goes to the liver, and it goes to the pancreas. The liver malfunctions, so your morning sugars are very high, and slowly it goes to your pancreas, and your pancreas can't produce insulin or enough insulin. And how much fat is causing this? You'd be surprised to know. You know how much fat causes this? Half a gram. Half a gram of fat that's on your pancreas is causing the poisoning of the beta cells that produce insulin. Now the pancreas, this amazing organ, it's a ajib organ like everything else Allah has made. Right behind your stomach, right here. Piche, under. This organ, if you look at people with diabetes, and this is a recent survey, 2010, 2011, they saw the pancreas of, they would see the pancreas of people who had diabetes. It's very hard to get to. You can scan other things, but to get to a pancreas is very hard. So when they see the pancreas, it would be, it's like a snail, but a lot more thicker, okay? Like that kind of a shape. So when they would see this, it'd always be small, and it would always be kind of, what's the word? It's like very, very rough and battered. So the people who study this would assume that this is the pancreas of everybody, until they discovered a method of seeing the pancreas in healthy people, and then they were gobsmacked, because the real pancreas, if you see a normal pancreas, it's so much different. It's much more bigger. Yeah, it's far bigger. You can't see this, but if you could, or maybe you can make it out. That's a healthy pancreas, and that's an unhealthy pancreas. Healthy people have that one. Non-healthy guys have this one. This is caused because of fat coming from the liver then into the pancreas. That causes the 0.5 gram of fat slowly accumulates in the pancreas and causes the pancreas to malfunction. It can't produce insulin. Now, not all the cells in the pancreas produce insulin. Not all the cells in the pancreas produce insulin. The pancreas produces enzymes, lipase, protease, amylase, which help, which are secreted into the okay, we'll come to the call in a few moments, inshallah. So the pancreas produces enzymes which help break food down. So when this 0.5 gram of fat accumulates in the pancreas, it affects certain beta cells which produce insulin, and you get diabetes. Okay. Now the key point is that picture I showed you of the two pancreases, the healthy person's pancreas and the unhealthy person's pancreas, and diabetes is a disease of the pancreas directly, solely in type 2. This can be reversed. So when you go on this diet I'm going to tell you, well, relate to you, because this is the chap who tells, it's all the hard work, Professor Roy Taylor. In 2 years' time, you will get your pancreas back to normal. Subhanallah. Like the liver, the pancreas can go back to where it was. Alhamdulillah. Okay, let's take this call. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum. हेलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
हेलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम. जी मुझे गर्ल्स के बारे में मालूम करना है कि अगर आप मुझे बता देंगे कि आजकल जो बच्चियों को मेनोपॉज की थोड़ी प्रॉब्लम हो रही है, जैसा पीरियड्स नहीं आते 3-3 महीने, या पीसीओ का, अगर आप उसकी मेडिसिन बता दें. और कई लड़कियां हैं जिनको ना ये प्रॉब्लम हो रही है.
हाँ बिल्कुल सही बात है, पॉलीसिस्टिक ओवरी सिंड्रोम के बारे में, और बिल्कुल सही बात है. आजकल छोटी छोटी बच्चियों को भी ये गेटिंग पॉलीसिस्टिक ओवरी, चॉकलेट सिस्ट एंड फाइब्रॉइड्स. जज़ाकल्लाह बहन, आप सुनती जाए इंशाल्लाह, and we will come to your question as soon as possible. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah. Okay, we'll come to this answer for this query of why young girls are getting a lot of polycystic ovaries, or PCOS as they call it, polycystic ovary syndrome, or Bartholin cysts or fibroids, in just a few moments. But first of all, I want to finish what I was saying, which is diabetes is not caused by obesity. Diabetes is caused when a person, male or female, breaches his individual fat threshold. Type 2 I'm talking about, type 2 diabetes. When they breach the level after which the body doesn't store the fat fat inside the fat cells, but rather in the pancreas, in the liver, then you have diabetes. Okay, now that is what causes diabetes, and everybody is different. Okay, so once you understand that, you understand the problem, that diabetes isn't your fault. It's not your fault, really. It is caused by your genes, basically. Oh, I mean, when I say it's not your fault, maybe it can be your fault a tiny weeny bit, because if you're eating more than you should, then you're contributing to reaching your individual fat threshold a lot more sooner than you would. And if you have genetics which dictate that you'll reach the IFT, the individual fat threshold, you reach it even when you're 19 BMI, then that's just plain, bad luck on this. But that can be reversed as well, because if you have very less fat, then you won't even get that. So I'll show you, inshallah, or I'll relate to you this Professor Roy Taylor's method of reversing diabetes, and this has been used by thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, a lot of people, and it's guaranteed. If you have diabetes within 6 years, then there's a 90% chance that you'll get rid of the diabetes for good if you maintain what this man says. And it's not difficult. He tells you to go on a diet, and then for 2 months, you lose 2.5 stones, if you're on this diet, all proven. And then going forward, what will happen is that you will have 3/4 of your diet, and you watch your weight, because the weight is what decides when you've reached your IFT, your individual fat threshold. मैं यही कह रहा था कि आजकल हमारे जो घराने के अंदर हैं, साउथ एशियन लोग जो हैं, हजरात और ख़वातीन, या फार ईस्टर्न लोग जो हैं, उनके यहाँ एक्सप्लोजन है डायबिटीज़ का एक्सप्लोजन है, और बेचारे सब लोग हजरात और ख़वातीन ये दवाइयाँ ले रहे हैं, दवाइयाँ खा रहे हैं, ग्लिकाजाइड और ग्लिपेनक्लामाइड और ग्लिक्विडोन और इस तरह की जो दवाइयाँ हैं, और समझते हैं कि इन दवाइयों की वजह से उनकी डायबिटीज़ कंट्रोल के अंदर रहेगी और उनको शिफा होगी। और जीपी के पास जाते हैं, वो कहता है बिल्कुल मैं आपकी डायबिटीज़ को ट्रीट करता हूँ। लोगों को समझ नहीं आती ट्रीट का क्या मतलब है, ट्रीटमेंट का क्या मतलब है। वो समझते हैं कि शिफा होगी, हालांकि ये ट्रीटमेंट है, और ट्रीटमेंट भी सेटिस्फैक्टरी ट्रीटमेंट नहीं है। अक्सर दवाइयाँ जो डायबिटीज़ के लिए लोग लेते हैं, तो इनसे वेट गेन होता है, नेवर माइंड वेट लूज़ होना, वेट गेन होता है। और दूसरी बात यह है कि अक्सर जीपी इवन दो वो आपके हामी हैं, लेकिन उनको, मैंने कहा था ना कि कितनी टाइम लगती है नई रिसर्च को आने से लेकर एक्चुअल आपके जो जीपीज़ हैं, प्राइमरी हेल्थ केयर फिजिशियन हैं, उनका इस रिसर्च को इस्तेमाल करना कितना टाइम लगता है। इस बेचारे का ये जो डॉक्टर रॉय टेलर है, प्रोफेसर ऑफ मेडिसिन एंड मेटाबॉलिज्म, न्यू कैसल यूनिवर्सिटी का, बड़े ही मुमताज़ शख्सियत हैं, मुमताज़ अतिबा में से हैं, बड़ा मुस्तनद और वेरी वेरी गुड फिजिशियन। तो इन्होंने सन 2011 से पहले ये रिसर्च निकाली थी कि देखें डायबिटीज़ जो है ना, डायबिटीज़ मोटापन का बीमारी नहीं है कि आपको कहते हैं कि भाई आप मोटे हैं, आपने अपने आप को डायबिटिक बना लिया, बल्कि वो अर्ज़ करते हैं कि डायबिटीज़ उस वक़्त होती है जब आदमियों के अंदर जो सेल्स नहीं होते हैं, सेल्स छोटे, आप बॉल की तरह समझें, छोटे होते हैं। जब आप खाना खाते हैं, फट इस्तेमाल नहीं करते हैं, वो फट अंदर जाता रहता है, और रफ्ता रफ्ता वो गोल्फ बॉल की तरह बढ़ते रहते हैं, लाखों से हैं, और आदमी को भी बढ़ता रहता है। तो जब आदमी का एक हद होती है, हर आदमी का, मर्द का, औरत का एक हद होती है, जब वो हद तक आदमी पहुंच जाता है, तो जिस्म के अंदर ये इस्तिताअत और ताकत नहीं होती कि अभी वो फट सेल्स के अंदर डालें, लिहाजा वो फट सेल्स के अंदर नहीं जा पाता, और आपने जो लिवर है ना, लिवर के अंदर चले जाता है, जिगर के अंदर, और आपके पैंक्रियास के ऊपर चले जाता है। जब वहाँ चला जाता है तो असल प्रॉब्लम डायबिटीज़ की वहाँ शुरू होती है। लिवर, क्योंकि लिवर तक पैंक्रियास से हार्मोन इंसुलिन आती है, और लिवर हर वक्त रफ्ता रफ्ता ग्लूकोज निकालता रहता है। जब लिवर के अंदर इतना मोटापन और फट आ गया, क्योंकि सेल के अंदर तो नहीं जाएगा, लिवर पर आ गया, तो लिवर के जो तासीरी अमल है वो ख़राब हो जाता है। सुबह के वक्त आपकी शुगर हाई होती है, ये नहीं कि आपने 2 घंटे पहले उठकर आपने खाना कर लिया, नहीं, ये इस वास्ते है कि उसकी जो सिस्टम है वो ख़राब है और ज़्यादा ग्लूकोज निकाल रहा है। रफ्ता रफ्ता फिर पैंक्रियास ख़राब हो जाती है, और कितना फट उसके अंदर ख़राब अमल करता है, 1/2 ग्राम, छोटी सी मिकदार फट की पैंक्रियास को ख़राब कर लेता है। और पैंक्रियास के अंदर ये जो छोटी सी आज़ाए अल्लाह ने पैदा किया इंसान के अंदर, जिसके ज़रिए इंसुलिन पैदा होती है, चाहे आदमी जहाँ भी हो, जो कुछ भी खुराक करे, पैंक्रियास इंसान के जिस्म के अंदर ग्लूकोज को रेगुलेट करती है, बराबर रखती है। अजीब। तो जो कुछ भी खुराक आदमी करे, चाहे आदमी यानी कोई एस्किमो हो, चाहे कोई यानी इंडिया का रहने वाला हो, बांग्लादेश का, पाकिस्तान का, जहाँ भी हो, जो कुछ खुराक वो खाएगा, चाहे वो खुराक है अलग और यहाँ खुराक अलग है, یہ جو پنکریاس ہے انسولن کے ذریعے شوگر لیول کو برابر رکھے گا. لیکن ظاہر بات ہے جب یہ خراب ہو جاتا ہے، اور خراب کب ہوتا ہے؟ جب آدمی رفتہ رفتہ زیادہ کھاتا رہتا ہے. اگرچہ آدمی ایک ایپل، چھوٹی سا ایپل سیب کھائے نا، تو 1 سال کے اندر 4 پاؤنڈز بڑھ جاتے ہیں اگر زیادہ کھائے. 10 سال کے اندر 40 گرامز یعنی کہ 40 پاؤنڈز، تقریباً 12-13 kg. بہرحال انشاءاللہ ابھی بریک کا ٹائم ہو رہا ہے، ہم بریک کے لیے جائیں گے. بریک کے بعد آپ ہمارا ساتھ رکھیے گا انشاءاللہ. ہم بات کریں گے ڈائبٹیز کے بارے میں، اور یہ جو پروفیسر رائے ٹیلر کی کتاب ہے ریورسنگ ٹائپ 2 ڈائبٹیز، جو بہت ہی عمدہ کتاب ہے اور بڑی جید ریسرچ ہے، اور یہ بتاتے ہیں کہ ڈائبٹیز کو کیسے ریورس کریں، اور وہ بھی 2 ماہ کے اندر. تو ساتھ رہے گا انشاءاللہ. آفٹر دا بریک وی ول بی بیک انشاءاللہ. انٹل دین پلیز اسٹے ود اس. جزاک اللہ.